Paraglow TV. So very quickly in today's video, we are going to be discussing, or I'm going to be talking about the Bible characters, some Bible characters that we judge too harshly. So I might just be able to change your mind about some of these Bible characters. So whether you're joining live, whether you're watching a replay, thank you so much. I'm so glad and honored to grace your screen. So today's question is very simple. Like, which Bible character do you think gets judged too harshly? Would it be, and I'm not asking about who was perfect, was the holiest, just the characters that have been misunderstood over time, maybe because we've taken their stories out of context, or we've added our own context into their own stories. Throughout histories, we've turned some heroes into villains and turned some villains into heroes. But when you actually read the Bible, not what people say about the Bible, sometimes you realize that the story is much more complicated. So today, I want to challenge some of our assumptions, and I wanted to disagree with me. If you think I'm wrong, just put a comment and let me know. I don't agree with you, or this is what I think. So let's go. It's a conversation. I would like to know where you're watching from and tell me what you think in the chat. I'll be reading everything and I will be responding to you. So first of all, who comes to your mind immediately when we talk about Bible characters that get misunderstood a lot? Would it be Judas? Would it be Rahab, Thomas, Martha, Job, Delilah, Jezebel? Who? Just type one. Let me know. Let me know who that person is to you. And I'll be here to read every one of it. So let's know. Let's know. All right, so I'll go first. So character one for me would be Martha. Martha the sister. Martha was the sister to Lazarus and Mary. Yes. So I think Martha gets judged unfairly. And let me ask, how many sermons have you heard where Martha is basically the villain? Like we see in Luke chapter 10, where the story of Martha and Mary and Jesus visiting them and all that played out. So did Jesus ever tell Martha that serving people was wrong? No. He corrected her anxiety, not her service. When people talk about the story of Martha sometimes, they just go on and on and on, and how she was abandoning the important things, like abandoning. You see how Mary went to sit at the feet of Jesus, and Martha was busy running around making everything to be in order. So Martha did not do anything wrong. Martha welcomed Jesus. She prepared the meal. She served. If everyone had become Mary, like if Martha had joined Mary to go and sit at the feet of Jesus to listen, to learn, who was going to do the cooking? Who was going to make sure that everything was put in order? Who was going to do the cleaning? Like everything would have been in a state of chaos. So the problem wasn't work, it was with comparison. So do you think that churches accidentally make hardworking people feel guilty? Does it happen? Hello, Idris. Idris Yahaya 1543. Good morning, Idris. How are you doing? Thank you for joining this live stream. Do let me know what you think in the comment section. So character 2 for me would be Thomas. I think whenever we hear Thomas, the first thing that comes to our mind is doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas, that was his label. He was labeled the doubting guy, the poor guy. But then let's think. I think every disciple, doubted at some point. Peter denied Jesus now. Peter denied Jesus. Some of them, they ran away when the period leading to the crucifixion of Jesus. Most of them ran away. Like they all had their times of struggle. But Thomas just happens to be the one that asked it out loud. So let me ask again, is asking questions the same thing as lacking faith? I do not think it's the same thing. So I actually think that churches today need more Thomases that would not just internalize those questions, that would voice it out, and ask. So have you ever felt afraid to ask questions in church? And do you think Christians should ask difficult questions? Let me know in the comments section. So yes, we've talked about Martha, we've talked about Thomas. So character 3 is Jonah. When you hear Jonah, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? The one that got away, the one that ran away. God sent Jonah to go and do something, and Jonah said, I'm not going to do this thing, I'm going to do it my own way, and he took off. So that's the first picture that we all know Jonah for. But then here's where it gets interesting. Jonah was not just afraid of Nineveh, he hated Nineveh. Now, a little backstory. Nineveh was known to be a violent place. It wasn't the best of places to be. So when he was sent to go to Nineveh, it wasn't as if he was going on a vacation. It was not a pleasurable task to embark on. Nineveh was violent. Nineveh was Israel's enemy. And Jonah knew that God might forgive them. And he did not want that. Does that make Jonah a bad person? When you've painted a terrible picture of somebody, that this person is a bad person, the person has done so many wrong things, and then you know that God might forgive that person. So you don't even want God to forgive that person because you feel they do not deserve it. So that was how Jonah felt towards Nineveh, and that was why he decided that he was not going to go to Nineveh. So a question for you: if someone hurts your family, oh, thank you. Let's get real. Thank you for your comment. When I think about Jonah, the first thing I think about is that he wasn't afraid to ask God questions. Thank you very much for that. Jonah was not afraid to ask God questions. And that's a remarkable thing and not something to be judged for. And I feel like a lot of Christians today, we should kind of adopt that. Thank you so much. Let's get real for your contribution. So yes, Jonah, if someone hurt your family, would you genuinely want God to forgive them? I think that's another angle to look at it from. And that usually sparks discussion. Is it easier to receive mercy than to give mercy? All right, so let's move on to character 4 of Bible characters that I feel are heavily judged. Eve. When you hear Eve in the Bible, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Like Eve that led us to where we are today. Eve that ate the forbidden fruit, gave it to his husband, listened to the serpent, and now here we are today. Yes, this one might sound a bit controversial. Eve gets blamed for almost everything, if not for Eve. If Eve did this and did not do that. Yes, Jesus said, forgive that you may be forgiven. Thank you so much. Let's get real. I really wish that Jonah knew about this. I really wish that Jonah read this your comment. Maybe he wouldn't have dodged going to Nineveh. All right, so we're talking about Eve. But then before we start blaming Eve and all that, let's ask ourselves questions. Who was actually giving the command first? It was Adam. Where was Adam when Eve was with the serpents? Where else could Adam have been? Adam was with her. So who does Paul later say that brought sin to this world? Adam. Let's talk about this. So I don't think that Eve should have carried the whole blame. I'm not erasing her responsibility in the role that she partook, but then I feel that she got judged too harshly. But let me know your thoughts in the comment. And I'm not giving a very wide perspective of this Eve's view, but personally I feel that Eve got judged too harshly. So character 5 is Samson. When you think about Samson, what immediately comes to your mind? When you think about Samson, the guy with the hair, the very strong person, the terror to the Philistines. Okay, so is it safe to say that Adam was afraid to stand as a man in his position? Well, I feel like if Adam had, would I call it afraid? But I just feel like Adam should have said something. Like he was the one that got the instruction. He was the first person to get there. And I mean, Eve was the helpmeet. You now see the serpent coming and you keep quiet. Like, what was he doing? He should I'm just trying to imagine it. If he had probably cut into the discussion, or if he had said something, Eve could have been called back to her senses that, oh, we are not supposed to do this. Like that conversation with the serpent and all that would have taken a different direction. And I also feel like that's why the serpent approached Eve and not Adam. So yes, back to Samson. So most people know Samson for his hair, for Delilah, and all that. Did Samson make terrible choices? Yes, absolutely, he made terrible choices, because we know that Delilah wasn't even the first woman that would take him down that terrain. But God still used him, right? God still used him. Despite all his mistakes, God still used him. And that's one amazing thing about God. Doesn't matter how broken you feel you are, God has this thing of turning, like he can create beauty from the ashes of anyone's life. I mean, we can see how Saul became Paul. We can see the story of Rahab. Like, there are a lot of people with broken stories that made a lot of mistakes. Even David, King David, a lot of people that made a lot of mistakes in their lifetime and still ended up fulfilling God's purpose for their life. So can someone finish well after repeated failure? I mean, Samson repeated, he failed several times, but he still finished well. So one mistake should not define a person's legacy. And we have a lot of people. Think about Rahab. We all know the story of Rahab. Rahab was the one that helped when the Israelite spies went to spy on Jericho. Rahab helps them hide, and in return for that, her family was spared. And she still, if you look at her bloodline, like her generational line, you still see that she was still in a very important, she played a very important role, even leading down to the birth of Jesus Christ. Let's think about them. Think about Lot. Lot did not make the best of decisions. Think about King Saul. Think about Peter. Peter that denied Jesus 3 good times. Think about Peter. Think about Naomi. I think about Job's wife. I can imagine how harshly Job's wife would have been judged. But I feel like as we are judging these people, we should also try to look at things from their own perspective. Look at Ananias and Sapphira. Look at Elijah. Look at what's her name? The name of Moses. Ishmael's mother. Yes, look at Haggai. So all these people, were they judged or were they judged fairly? So let me know. Yes, thank you for your comments. So I'm going to wrap this up very quickly. So in closing reflection, I just think that I don't have a lot of time to do this. This is just my break period. So I think that this conversation teaches something very important. The Bible is full of imperfect people. Sometimes we flatten them into stereotypes, but then real people are even more complicated, and that's the point. God doesn't always, he doesn't only walk through perfect people. He walks through people that say yes to him, fearful people, people that yield to him. He can walk through whether you're jealous people, broken people, impulsive people. We've seen the lots of them in the Bible, and we've seen how God is still able to carry them through. So it doesn't matter how broken, how damaged, how unusual or how abnormal you think or you feel that you are or your life is. But then thank God that God is the one judging you and not you yourself, because I'm sure you're judging you. Sometimes we tend to judge ourselves too harshly than even God himself. So we've seen God use people who are jealous, broken, impulsive, people who ask questions, people who fail, people who come back. So maybe before we even judge another Bible character or even another person, let's ask ourselves, have I read their whole story? Have I been in their shoes? There is a saying in my local dialect that says, the person that wears the shoe knows where it hurts the most. So this is a question that I want to leave you with as I get back to work today. What Bible character do you think deserves deserves a public apology from Christians and tell me why. And I promise I'm going to reply your comments. So thank you for joining my live. Thank you. Let's get real 144. Thank you, Idris. Alpha. Thank you all, and see you when I get to do this again. Thank you so much. Let's get real 144. And bye.